Hi, I'm Mary McDonnell, and I'm at ComicsOnline. Hello.
Hi, Mary.
Matt? Hi.
Yes, it is.
How are you?
Good. It's so nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you. Nice to meet you, too. Where are you? Where am I speaking to you from?
So I'm based in Chicago.
Oh, great. Okay, good. That's where we're headed.
We are thrilled that you're coming this way. I've had the honor of interviewing so many of your peers from Battlestar Galactica over the years, but you're one of the few lead cast members that I haven't spoken with. So I'm thrilled to add you to my list.
Well, isn't that lovely? It's perfect.
I just spoke with Katie last week. We talked a lot about the casting process and some of the practical elements of the sets. And I sort of like to start there. Just what was your casting experience like for the role of President Roslin?
Basically what happened was, and it's going to sound like a cliche because it is, but it's true, as most cliches are. I was having lunch at Sardi's with my agent, and they came in to meet me and said, you've been given an offer. And I said, oh, great. What is it? And they said, well, it's kind of unusual. It's a kind of a backdoor pilot miniseries on the Sci-Fi Channel for a remake of Battlestar Galactica. And honestly, I never really watched Battlestar back in the old days because I didn't have a television in New York. I was a stage actress. We never watched TV. So, but I knew about it, and I kind of knew that it was an odd match, me and what I thought it was. So I said, oh, it doesn't make any sense, but wow. And they said, no, it's supposed to be good. Anyway, we walked to their office after lunch. I picked up the script and I went home and read it, and I was just stunned at how brilliant it was. And I called them right away, and we set up immediately a breakfast with Ron Moore and Michael Reimer and David Icke. And we had a breakfast because I wanted to make sure we clicked if we were going to be spending potentially years together. And, you know, the rest is history.
Wonderful.
Do
you know how many other cast members have been cast by that point, or were you one of the earliest ones cast?
I was actually the first one cast. They had already talked to Eddie. Now, this will change every time Eddie talks about it, so we argue about this all the time. But this is my understanding, is they had already spoken to Ed about Adama, but he hadn't said yes. And then they went to me for Roslin to get my yes. So that would help Eddie to say yes, which apparently it did. So they'd already offered it to Eddie, but he hadn't yesed yet. So I got in there and yesed, and then he yesed because he found out also I was doing it, which it was really important to the both of us who was going to play the other role.
I think it came across wonderfully, and knowing that that is part of the story makes it even more special.
Isn't it nice? Yeah, I know, it's fun.
One of the most impressive things about the show was how grounded and realistic the set components were. And I was curious, I know Colonial One was a tighter quarter space, but was there a particular set that you just enjoyed getting to play in?
You know, it's funny. I never thought I would think back fondly on the year on Colonial One, but I kind of do, or however long it was. It was so awkward as a set, and finally we moved me, as you know, onto the Galactica. But what was interesting about Colonial One was that the claustrophobia of it was naturally really supportive of the storytelling, but it was hard to really get interesting shots in there because there was no room. And also it was so spooky because literally all I saw for 10 to 12 hour days out the window was sky with stars, and it was very isolating. So thank God for Billy, because he was so much fun, Paul Campbell, because he would have gone crazy in there. But then when we moved Laura out of there and over to Galactica, I think my fondest memories, well, kind of a toss-up between Adama's quarters and Laura's office. But I have to say, I think we had the most fun in Adama's quarters, but I had some of the most difficult decisions were made in Laura's office. And those moments of having to, decide to, assassinate someone or ban abortion or whatever it was that were difficult exchanges internally, morally, where I had to dig really, really deep in the silence of my office to kind of find where in me did I understand these choices in Laura. And I remember the intimacy of Laura's office around those very, very difficult decisions. I hope that made sense.
No, absolutely. One of the interesting things also with this series in particular was how many, we'll say, milestone events or plot twists that came throughout the seasons. When I was speaking with Katie, she said the new Caprica twist and the time jump was a big one for her. I was curious, what plot twist elements or what moments really stand out to you as far as the bigger picture story for Battlestar Galactica?
Well, for me, plot twist, I think it was more the complexity of Laura's understanding of herself and the introduction of, some of the things she went through with cancer, the Kamala, whatever it is, Kamala. I'm getting confused with the vice president, who's our candidate. I think it was more like surprising to me, things that would happen to Laura in relation to her spirituality, in relation to her politics, in relationship to, and the big surprise really was kind of an ongoing deepening with Adama, because as you remember at the beginning, we just didn't like each other one single bit. It was borderline, hate. And so the idea, the whole sort of ride into that level of intimacy and relationship that actually turned out to kind of be a soulmate relationship, that was really, really surprising at times to both of us, the deepening of that writing. The one moment I remember being so excited by, very surprised by, that they gave it to me, because they hadn't given Laura that kind of, abandon of her emotions, was when she threatened to come down with all hellfire on them if they hurt Adama. And that moment was, when I read that writing, I was incredibly surprised.
Is there an aspect of Battlestar that has carried with you throughout your career, something that you've taken personally away from your time there?
I think what I learned from Battlestar, first of all, I've taken away we all have, the incredible ensemble, the material that we were given was so extraordinary, it was so timely, it was so relevant, it was so edgy, and it's maintained itself. So out of this incredible group of actors, the casting is superb, grew the friendships that have maintained and sustained, and really strongly. I've done so much, as you know, in 40 years, and worked with great ensembles, but this one has maintained its closeness. The friendships have gotten deeper over the years, not less. That we've all taken away. But also some of the ideas of what it is to fight, to survive, whether it's to survive ideals or aspirations politically, socially, or literally survive physically. We learned so much on that show that we had to go through and we had to examine and we had to bring ourselves to. And I think that deep down inside, we all kind of knew that all of these tools that we were forced to learn for our characters were going to pay off for us in our lives. And I think it's very apparent right now. So I feel like Battlestar allowed me to change, literally, how I thought and what I was capable of sustaining, and my own personal resilience, which I think we are all being asked by the universe right now to strengthen. So I feel like the show gave us each of us individually the opportunity to get stronger, and collectively the opportunity to have a very loving family.
That was very well said.
Oh, thank you. I'm not making any sense to me this morning, so I'm glad I'm making sense to you.
100%. And on the topic of resilience, I'd like to pivot for just a moment. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about one of my favorite movies of all time, which is you got to be in Independence Day.
Yes.
And I was hoping you could share any stories from behind the scenes, anything poignant to you, but that movie has always stood out. That is one of my comfort movies. My wife and I bonded over that one as well, but just hearing about the making of that story in particular, about humanity's drive to survive also, I think dovetails wonderfully with what you just said. But what can you tell me about that experience?
It was just absolutely delightful. As you know, I was not in it very much, so my shoot didn't last that long. But fortunately, I was able to sort of at least somewhat meet a great deal of the characters. But I think that, do you remember the two ladies in the airplane hangar when they were talking about dance?
Yes.
Yes. I think that day was really special. The set was amazing. We had a great time doing it. We were out there in the open in Nevada, or wherever we were, outside of Las Vegas. And then there was the set of the airplane with Will and da-da-da-da. There just was just something magical about the reality and the sweetness of that particular scene, which I really always think about when I think of that movie. And the other thing I think about is on my very first day, I was flown from upstate New York to the set outside of LA. I was flown, so I was in this bucolic, beautiful lake country, wine country. I landed in LAX and they drove me straight to the set. And I, within a couple of hours, was covered in blood and with my clothes a little ripped. And I was on the ground having crashed in a helicopter. So that was my first scene. And I know, right? It's like, good thing I had some experience. So what happened was, I got out of the black car, that they drive you in, and I went into the trailer and they dressed me, and then they put me in the van to take me to the set. And suddenly I was driving through LA after an apocalypse. I mean, buildings collapsed. This set was just to drive to the place where my helicopter crashed. It was so traumatic to even look at it, even pretend sense, you know what I mean? I wasn't kind of going, oh, wow, look at these great sets. I honestly got traumatized just by the ride. Palm trees falling, buildings, like it was so cars upside down. And I just, I'll never, ever, ever stop thinking about the awe of how these extraordinary designers can transform a world. And they give actors the opportunity to imagine the right things I'm quite moved by it, actually. So those are my two strongest memories. I'm trying to think if I have anything else oh, yes. That moment, Liar, between Bill Pullman and I think I remember that one because people are always talking to me about it at conventions. It was a very sweet moment, and we were all very emotional, and it took us a while to get to a take that was clean enough to use, because it was hard to not get deeply emotional, and we couldn't afford to.
Well, that moment, that beat in the movie, I think really helped to solidify it as, one of those standout performances. But entirely the entirety of Independence Day as a whole, you all did incredible work with that. The longevity of Battlestar Galactica and what your cast and crew have put together and done in the last 20 years is, a testament as well to your work. And I'm thrilled that we get to celebrate you all this weekend with 20th anniversary. And it sounds like you got most of the gang together. And this is a pretty incredible group that you got.
It's going to be great. Did we get to meet you? Are you coming?
Yes. So I'm going to be there at the very least on Friday, but I'm hoping to do at least 2 days. So I'll be doing press for the event, but I would love to meet you in person.
Fantastic. I look forward to it, Matt.